Welcome to Tech Talks. I'm Holly Scott. I'm thrilled to have with me today Matt Conlon, the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing of SomnoMed. Matt has an extensive background in disruptive technologies in the med tech industry over 3 decades, specifically associated with sleep and respiratory care. So thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Good to be with you, Holly.
Yeah. Before we jump in, I'd love to just, ask you the big question here. What drew you to SomnoMed, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, the short answer is you did. But the longer answer is I had been in CPAP and bilevel therapy in the respiratory world back with Respironics prior to the Philips acquisition. And then I spent 10 or 11 years in the infection control market. And then a short stint in orthopedics, hand surgery, and then you found me. So that's how that happened.
What was it about SomnoMed and the vision of the company that drew you in?
So it was really ironic that after being away from the sleep and respiratory world for a number of years, while I was in it and selling CPAP, I myself was a silent OSA sufferer. My wife had kicked me out of the bedroom. One of my marketing folks at Respironics had sent me, an early stage device for trial. I guess Respironics was kicking around the idea of getting into this industry. So I wore it for a few nights. It was a boil and bite kind of thing. I wore it for a few nights. Was back in the bedroom with my wife. My wife said, "That's a miracle." And all things were good until about 2 weeks into it, I couldn't open my mouth. I got severe TMJ. So coming into the interview process with SomnoMed, I was like, wow, these things are still out there, huh? And, it was explained the whole journey, the challenges, et cetera. But bottom line, I remember at the end of my interview process, I'm thinking to myself, but I know it works, right? I had been there. This was set many, many years ago. 10, 15 years prior. The technology had advanced since then. SomnoMed was the leader in the space. And despite all of the challenges, honestly, I was given warnings on the challenges of this market, which we can get into. Mm-hmm. But bottom line was, I was a believer. I knew it worked. And despite the challenges, it's something I personally take on, I seem to take on professionally as a trend. The challenges didn't scare me. So here I am, 3 years into SomnoMed.
Yeah, there's something to be said for the market that drew you in that kind of mild to moderate case, right? But sleep apnea itself is a pretty substantial issue from what I understand. Why is that? What's the situation with sleep apnea today?
Well, you know what, Holly, before we get into the details of that, which I'm eager to, let me back up a little bit. I mean, your Tech Talk show is obviously particular to professionals in the life sciences arena. And before we get to drill down into my specific industry, I want to kind of share my perspective of my 30 plus years in the industry and how we all, regardless of what sector of the healthcare tech industry we're in, each of us is in. And this might sound a little hokey, but bottom line, what we all share is an opportunity to treat patients and make patient lives better. It's so hard, I think, on a day-to-day basis to remember why we're doing it, but everybody has to get up with a purpose, right? We as an industry, again, regardless of what sector, are so fortunate to be able to get up in the morning and say, my purpose is to enhance or save lives, right? A lot of people might do the wrong things for the wrong reason and use that as kind of a cover for, being patient-centric. But the challenge, my continuous challenge with my organization is really to remind everybody why we're in it, regardless of what your role is in the company. That's what drives me. That's what should drive everybody, and we should all be passionate about following that purpose. So, again, for your entire audience, I think that's something we share in common, and we need to build a culture around that. Culture, hardest thing I've ever tried to. It's not about Friday pizza day or a picnic lunch on a August afternoon. It's something that everybody can rally around, and we as an industry are so fortunate to have a patient-centric approach that we can rally around. So anyway, let me get back to your question on OSA in general and why it's important to address. Conference after conference, and this goes back, as long as I've been associated with the industry, the stats just hit you in the face. And whether it's 25 million or 50 million undiagnosed OSA patients in the US alone, there's a boatload of undiagnosed, untreated OSA patients to one degree or another, whether it be mild, moderate, or severe. And the majority of those are in the mild to moderate range. I think what's so tricky about this is it's almost like diet or smoking. It's been equated to both. Diet. Why do we all eat potato chips and Doritos once in a while when we know that in the long run it's going to hurt us, right? It's going to hurt our quality of life and our health care, and our contributes to obesity. But it doesn't happen when you take the bite of the Dorito, right? Smoking doesn't happen with this cigarette or the next cigarette. It happens over time. And same thing with sleep, and it's even more buried. I mean, a third of our lives is during sleep. Imagine walking around, the 2/3 of our lives breathing irregularly or not getting enough oxygen that we need on a breath by breath basis. Literally a third of our lives for sufferers of sleep apnea, that's what happens. They're not breathing, they're not getting oxygen, sufficient oxygen, etc. And there are all sorts of longer term ramifications that the science has proven out. So that's why I'm passionate. We know the problem exists. It's kind of underlying everybody's stream of consciousness, and it's a matter of awareness in addressing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the audience who may not be as familiar, and even for me as I learned more about the organization, sleep apnea is a continuum of sorts, right? There's various degrees of how serious it can be. Some can cause death in the middle of the night. The lack of oxygen getting in, whether it's your tongue collapsing, your jawline, whatever that physiological makeup looks like, if you have obstruction that's prohibiting your breath, it can be either terminally damaging immediately, or it can be, like you said, more gradual over time. So what we're addressing here in the obstructive sleep apnea space is that continuum. There's the mild case, there's the moderate cases, and then there's the very severe cases. And it's my understanding that in the severe cases today, and perhaps you can comment on this too, that the CPAP is standard of care. Would you say that is still the case?
Yeah, but even before getting to that, Holly, and obstructive sleep apnea is only one component of sleep disordered breathing. There can be central apneas and all other, sleep hygiene contributors, narcolepsy. I mean, there's all sorts of, so obstructive sleep apnea is only one category. But within that space, yes, CPAP, which again, back in the early 90s, I was a part of. I think Respironics was probably about a $25 million company. Now the Philips and Respironics, they're in the multi-billions of dollars in the CPAP field alone. So CPAP is, as they say, the gold standard. And it's one very effective treatment option. But my job, our job at SomnoMed, is to bring to light alternatives to CPAP, because there's as high as, and the numbers are all over the board, but 40, 50, 60% failure or non-compliance rates on CPAP. So CPAP is wonderful for those who tolerate it on a nightly basis, all night long. And it's not the best option, not their best choice for especially the mild to moderate patients who simply can't tolerate pressure through a mask and a hose on a nightly basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for just getting a visual on them, they're pretty complex systems. They got to be challenging to clean. They got to be challenging to sleep comfortably with. They got to be so compliant. So I can see how that would be quite a challenge, right?
You know what, Holly? I'm very careful not to knock CPAP.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's saved many, many lives over the years. It continues to save lives. It's just not for everyone.
Sure.
It's a gold standard for a reason, because it works. If the patient can tolerate it. So, it's funny. I just came off a couple of weeks ago. We had what we call our SOM Summit down in Phoenix, where we had probably about 125 sleep physicians and sleep dentists. And the conference didn't center around our products or oral appliance therapy in particular, or why not CPAP. It centered around all of the treatment options available to patients, and how do we bring we want the right treatment. And as a matter of fact, the theme of the conference was the right therapy for the right patient at the right time. So again, as an industry, our obligation is to find the right therapy. It may not be my oral appliance therapy or my product in particular. It might be CPAP, it might be surgery. I think we've all seen, Inspire commercials where it's an implantable device that opens up the airways with, electronic stimulation. Again, it's number one, phenomenal for patient awareness, and the fact that patients are recognizing that, gee, I do have a problem. I don't like CPAP. I need another option. Maybe that one's for me, and maybe that option isn't for them. But again, the industry in general has to approach it with I want to be available, accessible. My option, my choice, our offering of oral appliance therapy, we want it to be an available, accessible option for those patients who are appropriate for it, who choose it.
That certainly comes back to the true foundation of the culture that you've set in terms of patients first, people first, and the fact that the market is so large and so underserved. There really are options for varying degrees of need, and based on the patients themselves.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of my challenges, frustrations, is that there tends to be, and this is in every industry, I suppose, but there tends to be territories, right? In industry territories, where everybody seems to see everything else, or every other company or every other technology as a threat. When you step back and look at the millions of patients who are untreated, undiagnosed, it reminds all of us that if they choose one of these several options, we're still only scratching the surface in treating all the patients who can and should be treated.
So where does that decision start, or those suggestions start? Is it with a general practitioner? Is it me going to my doctor and saying, my husband says that I gasp and snore at night, or is there anything that can be done? And if so, does that GP, are they equipped with the right information to understand all the options, or are they exclusively defaulting to that gold standard?
It's funny. It sounds like we you and I didn't discuss this beforehand, but you just teed me up for exactly what SomnoMed is trying to do. So I have my own personal experience, my own personal experience with oral appliance therapy, and how it wasn't until I started at SomnoMed that I really saw it as an option. And it was obviously very accessible to me now being in the industry. But I've had relatives who also come to me and say, hey, how do I do this? You know, I don't want CPAP, or I was on CPAP. How do I do this? And one of the frustrations the that I have and also that's shared by the patients is if we tell them to go to their GP, as it stands today, the GP in general is not aware of oral appliance therapy as a clinically effective, valid, accessible, affordable option for their patients. And as we all do, we tend to, just keep riding the freight train that we're on. So their easy button today, GPs and even many sleep physicians, their easy button is to call the respiratory DME company and get that patient tried on CPAP, right? That's the freight train. That's the easy button today. So SomnoMed, and the reason I was actually brought here was to initiate what we call a medical initiative, whereas the industry, including SomnoMed previously, was completely focused on the dental industry because it's an oral dental appliance. The industry and SomnoMed and our competitors would simply go to sleep dentists and say, hey, choose my device over theirs, features and benefits price over their features and benefits and price. And we'd all be fighting for the same market share. Literally, so this, what I call this ecosystem, this sleep dentistry ecosystem was sitting out over here. Meanwhile, the primary ecosystem that was dominated and is dominated by CPAP and now other options as well, that dental ecosystem was outside of that. So my entire role was to help to integrate this dental ecosystem into that primary sleep ecosystem. So we're doing that through what we call our medical initiative, whereby we're putting up teams, sales, marketing, to go and educate physicians to make them aware of the option. But it's not only, at first it was, hey, we need to show them the clinical effectiveness of oral appliance therapy. And we have that, we have the data. We always need more data. We'll always, and forever need more data to prove any therapy, right? But we have the clinical effectiveness data of oral appliance therapy in our products. But when I started, it was like, oh, gee, we need more research and publication on clinical effectiveness. I remember sitting with a huge key opinion leader in the field, and he leaned over the table and he said, Matt, we have that. We have that. And we do, right? So it's not, so now we have to go into the physician or the prescriber and say, look, here's the data. And most of the time they nod their head, great. But now it's the how. How do I do this? I'm used to hitting the easy button where the respiratory DME company comes in and takes the patient off my hands and puts them on CPAP and makes sure they're compliant or not. Where's my easy button? So the challenge now is creating the treatment pathways. How does the physician get the patient diagnosed and then treated? And that treatment, again, needs to come from a qualified sleep dentist. So there are what we call barriers or hurdles along the entire treatment pathway. So going back to my own family and friends, I have to search high and low for a qualified sleep dentist in their area who maybe they can start there and get put on sleep testing. If I tell them to go to their GP, I have to tell them exactly what to say and maybe give them some brochures and flyers and tell them, hey, be insistent that your choice is oral appliance therapy. Because otherwise the physician is going to send them to the local sleep lab for a 5-6 5-6 week wait for a sleep specialist, and more than 90% of the time they're going to be steered towards CPAP. So that's the challenge. That's the challenge, to create the pathways to treatment that are accessible for the patients, and also easy and frictionless, as I call it, for the prescribers, the physicians themselves.
So
that was a long answer.
No, that's a great answer, and it's comprehensive and important, because that awareness you're sharing, the awareness is with the docs. It always starts with the clinicals, right? They want the white paper validation. Okay, we've checked that box, but that's not enough. We need this momentum to build, and this process to be built out. So the device, the oral appliance itself, is fitted by a dentist that's been certified in this. Is that the only way it can be fitted right now?
So there are a number of oral appliance options, from a non-medical device, non-FDA cleared gizmo that you can probably buy at Walmart or on Amazon, to FDA cleared, what we call boil and bites, that have little to no dental touch. It's a patient kind of self kit. And then, by the way, that's what I used on my first trial. It jutted my jaw out. It opened up my airway. And then within a week or two, it destroyed my mandibular joints. So there's a number of different options. There's actually 175 different FDA cleared or more oral appliances. SomnoMed specifically focuses on the oral appliances that are only fitted by qualified dentists. And the certification, it's not true, it's not real certification, it's just a number of different qualifying criteria, whether it be through an organization like AADSM, the American Association of Dental Sleep Medicine. There's opportunities for them to be trained and qualified and certified to an extent. I mean, it's not a legal requirement, but SomnoMed, that's exactly what we do. Is and when we talk to these physicians, exactly. Part of the problem in the past is physicians might have tried it and they send the patient to their local dentist who knows nothing about this, right? Mm-hmm. And the dentist might give it a shot, and the physician never hears back from the dentist, and the therapy may or may not have worked, but the local family dentist, bottom line, wasn't qualified, or there was a poor outcome for that patient. So there's been a lot of missteps in the industry, and that's what we're trying to address, right? So the physician has to send their patient to the right qualified sleep dentist. So part of this medical initiative, what we're doing at SomnoMed, is to to pair up the currently qualified sleep dentists that have the accreditation and the qualifications and the experience with the physicians, so we can assure the physicians that these patients are in the right hands for successful oral appliance therapy. And the other part is we don't have enough dentists. So as we succeed on the medical initiatives, on the medical side, when we get all these prescriber heads nodding, saying, yeah, I'm in, like, just find me the right dentist, then we turn around and say, holy cow, we don't have enough qualified sleep dentists. So that's the other end of the spectrum that we're addressing, is to help dentists, regardless of their level of skill, put them on a pathway through a lot of industry collaboration, and steer them towards the right organizations that can help qualify them and give them the right experience. But we hold their hand through that, because we have to develop a bench, if you will, of qualified sleep dentists as we succeed with medical initiatives.
Is it critical to have that dentistry foundation? Do you ever envision a world, I'm just thinking out loud with you here, where the GP says, oh, I can do that. I have the ability to take the measurements or customize the mold, or I have no idea what goes into actually creating one for a particular patient. Just curious if that isn't all an option.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, I mean, I'm aware of, maybe a handful of physicians who have tried or do try to do that themselves to say, hey, this isn't so complicated. Let me try to do it myself. SomnoMed really, though, we really value the training of the sleep dentists themselves. I mean, there's a lot going on with the oral cavity. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, and the geometry and the precision, but with which you have to measure to get the right outcome in treating the OSA. And on the opposite spectrum, we've also talked to ENT surgeons who are scared to death of going anywhere near the oral cavity, teeth, right? That's not my thing. I was never trained on that, right? And they want to defer to qualified, experienced sleep dentists in that field. So our preference always is, and look, there's always going to be kind of shortcuts to cut out middlemen or costs in the process. But as far as SomnoMed goes, there's no cutting out the qualified sleep dentist. And look, there might be a bell curve of, hey, this is easy. 90% of these patients easy to do, and maybe I don't need a dentist for this or that. But there's too many of those patients. Remember, each appliance is custom made to each mouth. Mm-hmm. No two mouths are the same. And that's part of the challenges here, where you have CPAP, you can make thousands of them and put them on the shelf and they're ready to go, right? Every machine is the same. Every medical device that we're manufacturing is specific to the patient's mouth. And that dentist, the inputs from that dentist have to be accurate and precise. It's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? So we have to train dentists, and certainly nothing, the training is in depth. They have the foundation. We have to help train them to give the right scans and impressions and the right methods for determining the appropriate bite, the appropriate starting point of protrusion of the jaw, et cetera. So yeah, every time we're going to fall back on the qualified sleep dentist to get it right for all patients.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Just with your real world example of, developing the issue, 2 weeks after buying something that you bought off the shelf. Look, how common is that going to be for the individual just going with whatever they have? It's the question was more around access. So access to the right qualified dentist is what needs to grow, right? And awareness.
Exactly. I mean, I kind of boil it down to supply and demand, mm-hmm. right? As we build demand, and I hate to make it sound so commercial, but the demand, again, I always step back to look at all of these millions of untreated patients. The demand comes from patient choice, right? So if a patient knows that they have a choice, they're more likely to open up the discussion with their physician. If they think that if they open up that discussion, the only option is PAP, there's a whole segment of that population that isn't even going to mention it to their physicians, mm-hmm. right? And that was me. I wasn't going to mention that I had been kicked out of the bedroom and I'm a snorer, because the only option in my mind back then was CPAP. So to the supply and demand side, both sides is what we're trying to address. Yes, we want the acceptance, the awareness, acceptance and adoption on the medical side as a valid, effective treatment. But as we succeed there, the supply side, in the therapist of oral appliance therapy, the dentists, we've got to work on that too. We have to build that up.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there benefits to the clinicians? And I'll ask that in two ways: the certified sleep dentist, and are there benefits as well to the GP that's caring for the patient more holistically with this OSA?
So, um, the benefits to the physician, and it depends on what kind of physician you're talking about. And again, in the industry, there are kind of turf battles, as in any industry profession and healthcare, et cetera. There are kind of turf battles going on that need to be worked out between, let's say, sleep physicians and GPs. Sleep physicians don't want GPs to do diagnoses, et cetera. They want to be a part of it because they're specially trained in the field, which is all understandable.
Sure.
But it's the bringing them together. So the patient going to the GP has to have the right pathway, has to be given the right information to make that choice. For the benefit to the physician, depending on what specialty they are, the GP, they're seeing, 30, 40 patients at a time at 10, 15 minutes, the GP or the PA, et cetera, right? Their patient load is just enormous, right? They want the easy button. They want to do the right thing by their patient, but they need the easy button, right? So currently today is, look, I'm going to refer you to this sleep specialist down the street, which is awesome. It's a sleep specialist. However, the ratio of sleep specialists to this huge number of undiagnosed, untreated patients is something like, I don't want to exaggerate, but the number I heard was something in the range of like 15,000 patients to every sleep specialist, right? So, and as we get into technology now, there are telemedicine options, right? So the GP might be able to hook up the patient to a more immediate, as opposed to a 6, 7, 8, 2, 3 month wait with the sleep specialist. They can hook them up to a telemedicine sleep specialist, have the consult virtually, right? Have the test, whereas before you had to, go to a sleep lab and sleep in a bed. Most sleep testing, a vast majority of sleep testing is done through home sleep tests, right? So again, in the virtual world, in the telemedicine world, that GP, if they have the easy button, if they have the process and the confidence in the process, they can get that patient linked up to a sleep specialist virtually through telemedicine, have a home sleep test sent to their home for them to do overnight for a night or two, get the results again virtually, have the post-consult virtually, and then be sent to the right dentist to actually apply the therapy if oral appliance therapy is the thing they've chosen. So again, the technology can be there, but the pathway has to be easy. So the benefit to the GP, and we work so collaboratively with a lot of industry participants who have these technology solutions. We don't have vertical integration for that whole pathway. We have the appliance today, right? So we work with industry colleagues to put those pathways together that are easy for the GP. So the benefit to the GP, long story short, is they want to treat their patients. They truly want to treat their patients. Most people who have a dedicated GP trust their GP that they want to do the right thing. Our job is to put an easy, frictionless patient treatment pathway. And so that's the benefit. If we can put that frictionless treatment pathway in the lap of the prescriber, and they're confident in the science behind the effectiveness of oral appliance therapy, they're happy. You're helping them to treat their patient. That's the benefit.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
It's the way you're creating this ecosystem around the patient with access, availability, less friction, more of a seamless rather than using the referral pattern phrase, maybe more of the partnership. Really looking at the patient more holistically and like what can we do as quickly and as effectively as possible while giving them as many options that are going to be dialed into what they're really dealing with and what's going to fit them best.
Exactly. And on the dental side, once they get through that, diagnosis and prescription, now they're faced with, now who do I send this? Which dentist do I send this patient to? And again, that's exactly what Medical Initiative does, is personally introduces the right dentist to the right. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges. This is one of the very few therapies that it really takes a collaborative approach, to have a physician, a prescriber, a physician work closely with the dentist, right? Again, the old ecosystem was the dentist saying, "Hey, this is ours," right? They, but we all know they need the physician to be on board to get the prescription. So, from kind of an industry association level, from the AASM and AADSM, and AASM is American Association of Sleep Medicine, AADSM, American Association of Dental Sleep Medicine, from the top down and from the bottom up, dentists and physicians have to respect each other, trust each other, and be collaborative in that patient treatment routine. And that's again what Medical Initiative, what our SOM Summit did, was to bring physicians and dentists together to get an understanding between them and a respect between them.
Well, you're chipping away at that big rock. I know you've been having some serious successes in
That's
the last,
what it is.
yeah, those
Yes.
last few quarters, the last year. Yeah, things are heading in the right direction, but it all starts with this awareness, attention, education, and partnerships across all of the stakeholders.
Absolutely.
That's great work. So if you're thinking, big picture, longer term, I know I'm sensitive to your time too.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of the next wave of innovation in oral appliance therapy? What if you had unlimited resources, unlimited budget, and you could really kind of put something together on the side that you think would be really interesting and possibly really impactful? What are your thoughts?
Well, I have to go. I don't need to use my imagination here. Really, I mean, we did research, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago with physicians, sleep physicians, and physicians who prescribe CPAP to their patients, and we asked them, why don't you prescribe more oral appliance therapy? And there were a number of responses. Everything from cost, or I'm going to lose my patient to the dentist, or not enough clinical evidence. But one of them was what CPAP has today and has had for a number of years is compliance monitoring. So every CPAP patient and their healthcare providers have the data on how much they use it. And that's tied to reimbursement, right? If they're not using it, it's not going to be reimbursed. So with every CPAP machine, there's compliance data. Yes, the patient is wearing it, right? Or here's how long per night the patient is wearing it, right? And the sleep community really has relied on that, and the payer community has relied on that to say, okay, look, if we're going to pay for this, we want to know that it's being used. So that historically has been missing from oral appliance therapy. There have been kind of bolt-on chips, kind of, big clumsy chips that you can bolt onto devices. But in general, patients that go on to oral appliance therapy, it's mostly subjective, some objective data through post-treatment testing. But mostly there's been no objective data to say that these things are being worn and they're working. SomnoMed is on the cusp of, as a matter of fact, hopefully by next year, next spring, of integrating that kind of technology into our oral appliances so that it will give both compliance, yes, the patient is wearing it, here's how much they're wearing it, and effectiveness. Here's, if they're lying on their side or their back, or how much of their nighttime sleep was interrupted. So it will give both compliance and efficacy of treatment on a nightly basis. That's what sleep physicians are very eager for. It tied among a couple of others in terms of why they don't prescribe more oral appliance therapy. So that technology will be offered. We're super excited about, SomnoMed, leading that, but also, it's a natural progression for the entire industry. There will be different ways and methods of other technologies, but that will soon be, I think, a standard and an expectation of oral appliances themselves, and the way to objectively measure, how well this is working from patient to patient. So I don't need to dream that up. The budgets are being spent, et cetera. And it's kind of hard to look beyond that, because it really is the next game changer in the industry.
Yeah, value. I can clearly see value for the clinician and the payer. And an interesting byproduct that I'm seeing in digitized and data-centric devices for the patient is this feeling and psychology of control, right? Having more insight into treating yourself and what that does in terms of confidence, in terms of compliance, in terms of keeping going, right? It's like, when the scale goes down and you're on the weight loss program, you want to keep going. If you're seeing your device work and you're seeing that your sleep patterns are better, it's motivating. So I can see how that would be a nice cycle to get in for all three real important people involved in that treatment.
Yeah, you hit that right on the head. I mean, the patient engagement, their participation in their treatment is huge. They're going to want to get up every morning and see on their their phone how they did last night, right? And it gives it, almost call it the gamification of healthcare, right? I mean, we have the Apple Watches and stuff like that, but as we engage patients in their therapy, their compliance, their participation and compliance through participation is going to go through the roof.
No, that pull through is powerful.
Yeah.
That is exciting. Well, I am so glad we got an opportunity to chat today and speak about all that's happening at SomnoMed. What a great time to be part of the organization.
Holly, I want to thank you. I mean, you've been really a strategic partner in growing the team here at SomnoMed. You've been a therapist of sorts to me in making sure we find the right talent, the right people that fit the culture of SomnoMed here in North America. So kudos to you for all the work you do in helping companies like SomnoMed to be able to be as patient focused as we are.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I love doing what I do every day, just because the same reason you do. Patients first, right? And then friendships can develop over the years like ours. So that's a huge benefit. I appreciate it.
There you go.
Well, thank you for joining us on Tech Talks. Until next time, I'm Holly Scott.